It's been exactly 5 years since a large group of white supremacists descended upon Charlottesville, Virginia, carrying torches and chanting anti-Semitic rhetoric. But the rally was met with resistance. Hundreds of residents who rejected racism took to the streets chanting "Nazi scum off our streets." The situation quickly turned violent and deadly. James Alex Fields, a man known in high school for being fascinated with Nazism and idolizing Adolf Hitler, drove his car into the crowd of counter-protesters, injuring dozens of people and killing 32-year-old Heather Heyer. And how did the then president of the United States respond? Listen to this.
You said there was hatred, there was violence on both sides.
Well, I do think there's blame. Yes, I think there's blame on both sides. You look at both sides. I think there's blame on both sides. You had some very bad people in that group, but you also had people that were very fine people on both sides.
Racial justice advocates see the violence in Charlottesville as a catalyst, a turning point for the nation, which led to the deadly attack on the U.S. Capitol. So, as a leader, what do you do when you want to learn from the past? You call on those who are experts in their field. Last week, President Biden met with a group of historians at the White House to work through his approach to multiple crises facing his presidency. As the Washington Post reports, during the nearly 2-hour history lesson, the group raised alarms about the threat to democracy at home and abroad. They went as far as comparing the threat facing the nation to the pre-Civil War era and to pro-fascist movements before World War II. Every president, starting with Ronald Reagan, has sought out and participated in these types of roundtable discussions with historians, except one. I bet you can guess who that outlier was. Joining me now is Barbara Walter, author of How Civil Wars Start and How to Stop Them. Now, Barbara, we all remember Trump's very fine people on both sides statement on Charlottesville. Was it comments like these that emboldened white supremacists to come out of the shadows? And I ask that because given all that we know about January 6th coup attempt, was this the moment they felt seen and that perhaps through social media they felt that they had a direct line to the now twice impeached former president?
Yes, norms matter. If people think that they're going to be chastised, if they're going to be punished for bad behavior, for incendiary language, they tend to control themselves. And if they think there are going to be no repercussions, they allow their worst instincts to be let loose. But what we saw in Charlottesville and what we saw on January 6th is something larger than simply the change of norms that have been allowed by a president who isn't restrained by them himself. This is the growth of a white supremacist and an anti-federal government movement that's been happening here in the United States. That's accelerated, actually, since 2008. Charlottesville was the first indication the public had that this existed. January 6th was an even more public indication. So that's really, I think, what's happening. The movement is growing.
So we know that Biden launched his campaign in part because of the horrific events in Charlottesville and Trump's response to it. He often notes that we're in a battle between democracy and autocracy, which I think is what you're trying to underline. It seems like no modern president has had to protect our republic's republic's vulnerabilities from foreign actors. We're actually trying to protect it from within. In your opinion, has President Biden done a good job protecting the soul of this nation? It's such a tough place to be. I mean, such a tough place to be.
So he understands the problem. He would like to take measures not only to protect our democracy, but to strengthen it. Our democracy has weakened since 2016. We are no longer the democracy that we were even 6 years ago. He would like to make our institutions stronger. He would like to put more constraints on the executive branch. He would like to make voting easier. There's a whole series of reforms that he knows are important and he would like to do, but he does not have the votes to do that. The Republican Party, the Republican leadership has made it clear that they are actually not interested in these reforms. Those reforms actually hurt their ability to continue to compete in elections as their base, and their base is predominantly white Christians, as that declines relative to other groups. And the Democrats, for the most part, don't have the votes in their own party to get it through. So the change is not going to come from the top, and therefore we have the same weak democracy that we had at the end of the Trump administration.
So I think, Barbara, one of the things that makes one realize is the importance of the courts in this case, because a lot of the things that you are rattling off, the need to access the voting rights because so many people are trying to, strike them from everyday Americans access to the ballot box. It seems that the courts are increasingly playing an important game in safeguarding our democracy. Can you speak a little bit of that, to that? Because I think that that's where people realize that this is where our institutions are safeguarded right now.
Yes. So, people don't realize how important the courts are. They don't think of them as a check and balance on power, especially executive power, but they really are. For example, one of the things that the courts can do is you can launch a lawsuit against, for example, the state of Michigan. If the state of Michigan wants to institute voter ID laws that are perceived to attempt to prevent certain ethnic groups from voting. And if you're successful, Michigan will have to change its behavior. So courts are actually, it's almost a stopgap measure when the other checks and balances aren't working. Our legal system can be quite important. The Ku Klux Klan, for example, was essentially brought down by lawsuits. By the mother of one of the lynching victims, brought a lawsuit against the Ku Klux Klan. She was one of many. She won the lawsuit. It cost the KKK an enormous amount of money, and they eventually went bankrupt.